started, we're running a few minutes behind, but I think we've got everything up and running now. So Dennis and John, thank you for getting all that set up in a hurry. And I hope everyone's enjoyed the cool weather we've had the last couple of days. I know Bob Blackbird's been mowing hay, and I think it was cured before you mowed it, Bob. So, any first time, I think we got some first time visitors tonight. First time visitors, if you raise your hand. Great, good crowd, thank you for coming. I was told before the meeting we've got some first time visitors all the way from California. There we go. Bryan, people come a long way to hear you. So, just real quick before we start with the presentation tonight, we actually got two. Mike, I know, has been passing out state membership cards back there. If you hadn't got yours and you've signed up, make sure you get it. 50-50 at the back table. If you haven't got those tickets, you can get those and sign up for the door prizes as well. Also, the event in August 11th, we've got tickets back there tonight for those. So if you're interested in buying a ticket tonight, we'll have them again next month. So, and always you can buy them on the internet and off of Facebook. So first tonight, we've got Bryan Fisher talking about summer splits. That's going to be interesting. A lot of people here to see that. And then we will have Sherwood Wilkes, did some research at UNCC, is that right, Sherwood? On the pesticide contamination of honey. So he's going to share a few minutes about the research and the findings in that project. So Bryan, come on up.
All right. Good evening. So just out of curiosity, seems like we have a good number of beginners here. Who has never seen me speak before? Sure. Wonderful. We have a few. My name is Bryan Fisher. I'm a fourth generation beekeeper in Cabarrus County. I've been keeping bees for 15 years, approximately, give or take a year or so. I run around 100 colonies solely by myself. My dad helps me a little bit with some equipment, but as far as the bee management, it's a one-man show. I typically raise a few queens and small-scale pollination, do a little honey production. I've been trained in over 100 hours of biodynamic beekeeping in a biodynamic bee farm, and worked on some semi-commercial operations, making splits and helping with their honey production. I was not born into this beekeeping business. I started it with one package and killed it. Started with another package and killed it, and another one and killed it. And on my fourth year, I got bees to live. And like I said, last year I was running around 150 colonies and 100 mating nukes, and almost sold my operation because it got stressful and a little too much in the heat of summer. So I scaled back a tad bit this year. So that's a little about me. And I like to start my presentations very similar to Billy Davis, if any of you guys have seen him. So at this time, we're going to learn a little bit about you and each other. So if everyone could please stand up. So if you've been keeping bees for a year or less, please sit down. 2 years or less. 3 years. 4, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25? 30? Let's give Mr. Fur, Mr. Blackwater, and Mr. Helms a round of applause. So, if it weren't for people like those three gentlemen that were standing, none of us would be here tonight. None of us would be here because in the past 30 years, these guys have expressed a willingness to change and evolve their beekeeping practices. 30 years ago, you could set a hive of bees out there and just have bees and go collect your honey once a year. These guys saw the coming and going of tracheal mites and still managed to persevere with their beekeeping when, 50 to 80% of beekeepers lost all of their bees. They have seen the varroa mites come, and they have changed their management practices to deal with that accordingly, as the small hive beetle. So kudos to them and all the beekeepers like them. If they wouldn't have stuck with it through all that, then we wouldn't be here to stick with the next mites that are going to show up coming from Asia. So, thank you. So obviously, we had 3 people standing up when I got to 30 years. This is not an easy hobby, right? So what I'm here to talk to you tonight about is kind of the way I run my management of my operation to make it sustainable. And by sustainable, I'm not talking necessarily about environmentally sustainable. I do like to keep that on the forefront of my mind. However, I do treat my bees. I'm not a non-treater. I got tired of buying bees a long time ago. So I treat them. When I say I run a sustainable operation, it's more of an economically sustainable operation. So I do that mainly by splitting my hives, which is what I'm going to talk to you tonight about. And that said, I'm certainly not here to change your opinion on the way you manage your operation. I'm not trying to tell you what you're doing is wrong. I'm simply trying to shed some light on what I'm doing, and maybe some of the things might work for you. So if you take what you will away from it. So, what is a split for you beginners? A split is when you would take one colony and divide it into 2 or more colonies. You split the population of that hive to increase your number of colonies. So why would someone want to split their bees, right? You have a colony of bees you got this year. Why would you want to split them? Well, you may want to split them to increase your numbers. Maybe you had 1 or 2 hives this year, and next year you want 10 hives. Instead of buying mixture packages, you can purchase a queen, split your existing bees, and have far less invested into it. Another reason someone may want to split their bees would be to have spare queens, right? You have enough colonies, you don't need any more. But maybe they all have last year's queens in them. You can make a few splits, put 2018 queens in them, and have some queens on reserve if you have some colonies go queenless in the fall, whenever queens get harder to come by. You may want to split your colonies just to have some more resources as far as bees and brood laying around. If you have a weak colony, a split is a good way to requeen a colony and or boost the population of a failing colony pretty much immediately. So you may want to use a split for that. So most of you are probably thinking, throughout your experience in beekeeping, most of the time you hear people splitting their bees in the spring. It's a really common practice, and a lot of beekeepers do it. And again, it may fit into their management practice and the management style. Maybe they don't want honey. Maybe they're a bee producer, right? So if you're a bee producer splitting bees in the spring, you're not really losing your honey crop. For me, and as I feel most of us in here, probably have bees because we would like to enjoy some honey. In my opinion, if you split your bees in the spring, then you can reduce the amount of honey you get, perhaps very significantly, off of a colony. So I'm not a huge fan of splitting my bees in the spring. I like to have every bee I possibly can in this colony for the honey flow, let them make honey, and then about now, this time of the year, when our honey flow is slowing down or stopping, we'll notice all this bearding on the front of our hives. We have all these extra bees, all these extra mouths to feed, and they're not doing anything. In my opinion, it's a perfect time to split that hive. Utilize those extra bees to make more hives for yourself. So one of the downsides to splitting bees in the spring, in my opinion, is the fact that Every packaging meat producer out there is trying to get queens early in the year. Therefore, the suppliers tend to push the limits and try and raise as many queens as they possibly can, as early as they possibly can. And then comes along a spring like this one, when we get a lot of rain early. And I'm getting 10 calls a week because people's package queens are failing, right? It shows me that the guys raising those queens got hurt by the weather, and those early queens were not great. They were trying to perhaps produce more than they should have at the wrong time of the year. Maybe there wasn't enough drones out there. So when you are trying to make early splits, you're in competition with getting these really early queens, oftentimes which are not of the highest quality. Occasionally you get lucky and get a great one, but you stand the same chance of getting a really bad one. Again, my main reason for waiting to do my splits is I want every bee in this box possible to make honey for me. That said, if you've been feeding your bees and done proper management over winter, oftentimes in the spring, you have to do something to keep your bees from swarming, to keep them out of that tree. Because like I've been saying, I want every bee in this hive possible to make honey. Well, if I just neglect them and don't split them and don't go in there and check them or do anything, and they're really robust and healthy, chances are they're going to swarm. And as we all know, when your bees swarm, the chances of that hive making honey are slim to none. They may make a little bit. They're certainly not going to make what they would have because all of your foragers left and made a hive somewhere, a colony somewhere else. So you're walking a very fine line in the spring of having a healthy, robust colony that's busting at the seams with bees, and having a healthy, robust colony that swarms out because you're doing so great. So yes, occasionally, in the spring, I will pull a few splits out of my bees to keep them from swarming, but I try not to. So some other methods I do before I will split my bees in the spring is I try and equalize them. We're going to pretend like we're just coming out of winter. I've got these hives that I've been feeding. They're really strong. And I typically put 20 to 25 hives per bee yard. So in a yard of even 10 hives, or 5 hives, or 100 hives, you're going to have some strong ones, and you're going to have some weak ones. So in the very early spring, it's a good time, instead of splitting your strong ones, maybe you could equalize those bees and take a little bit of resources from your strong ones and give them to the weak ones to reduce the swarming impulse on your strong hives, and to get those small hives, those weaker hives that are a little bit behind, boosted up where they might actually make you a honey crop instead of just building up on the honey crop. So how do I do that? One thing I could do is I come to this hive that's boiling over with bees in the spring, say the second week in March, and I know they're going to swarm before they get to that honey flow, the main flow, the second week in April. I can go in here and remove frames of open brood with the bees attached, as long as the queen is not on it, and move that entire frame over to another colony, bees included, and they won't fight because those bees are open brood, and they've never flown before. And it's early spring. Those bees are more concerned with working what nectar flow they have, coming off the maples or whatever at that time of year. So you can take those frames, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 from a strong hive or 4, and put them in your weak hive, equalize them out. Another way you can equalize your colonies, like I said, I have many colonies in one bee yard. If I have a colony sitting right over here where this podium is that's really weak, and I have this one that's boiling over with bees, let's say not really weak, let's say moderately weak. It's got 1 box full of bees and I wish it had 2. And this one's got 3 boxes of bees and 2 boxes, and I know they're going to swarm because they've got 20 frames of brood coming on. Well, I haven't found cups or cells in here yet, but I'm, anticipating the swarming coming on. So what I can do in the middle of a forage day is go out there and swap these hives locations. These bees come back to this location because of the GPS location in their brain. They don't come back to this box with a yellow top and a blue bottom board and a story and a half blue hive. They're coming back to this coordinate. So if you take this hive and set it over there, and take that hive that's mediocre, strong, got some bees in it, and set it here, what's going to happen is all those foragers from this strong hive that is now sitting over there are going to leave. Well, when they come back, they're coming back to this GPS coordinates. And you're going to immediately boost up the population in this hive. Now, I must tell you that if you go doing this in the spring with a really weak colony, it's trouble. Because that really weak colony doesn't have the brood pheromone in it. And then all of a sudden you get all these strong forage bees coming back from this colony to maybe a colony with 2 or 3 frames of bees, a little tiny softball, soccer ball sized cluster. They're going to ball that queen because she just doesn't have the pheromone. That's why I say it needs to be a moderately strong colony. If she has a full box of bees with several frames of brood, chances are you can do that and be okay. So that may not be the best way to equalize, but it is very effective, especially if you have a decent population in that hive over there. And this one's boiling over, and you just want to give that one some more bees. But you could, of course, like I said, move some frames of bees over if you wanted to. Another way of equalizing your colonies to help prevent swarming. Does anybody use double screens in their operation? Mr. Helms, great. Most underutilized tool in beekeeping right here, if you have less than 20 hives, in my opinion. Has a 3/4 inch board in the middle with a piece of number 8 hardware cloth on each side, and it's got a little shim all the way around it. What you can do, again, you have a really strong, healthy, robust colony here. And this colony is real weak, sitting right beside it. Anywhere in your bee yard, for that matter. Anywhere in any bee yard you have, for that matter. In fact, it would work better if you brought it from another bee yard. Your weak hive. You want to build it up, or if you have 2 hives in your backyard, coming through winter, one's really weak and one's really strong. Purchase yourself one of these double screens, also known as a Snell Grove board. You come out here, take the top off your strong hive, and replace it with this. First, I want to explain what this is. So it's a double screen, 3/4 inch board. Most importantly, it's got an entrance on both sides. And it's got one on the sides here. So the bees can come and go. So what you would do, close your entrances. Put that on top of your hive, your strong hive. And bring a weak hive over from wherever. This doesn't have but 2 frames of bees, and it's a 70-degree day in the last week of December. It's Christmas. These bees will never make it. They only have 2 frames of bees. They don't stand a chance. But in here, you got, these bees are, the cluster's huge. It takes up, the whole middle of this box, pounds and pounds of bees in there. You take this hive, and you can set it up here on top. And this hive will benefit simply if you just open this entrance and let them forage there. What they're going to benefit from is the heat that's being generated by the bees beneath them down here in this box. It's going to come right up to that double screen. And the fact that you have a 3/4 inch gap between those screens, those bees cannot touch their honey tongues. Therefore, they act as 2 separate colonies. They won't fight. This queen will act as her own queen in her own colony. These bees will act as their own queen in their own colony. Except for this one's going to benefit from that heat. They're not going to have to put forth all that effort into keeping what little tiny bit of brood they may or may not have at 98 degrees. Instead, they can worry about moving some food around and not producing heat and do what they have to do. But better yet, what you can do with this double screen board is you've got your small, weak hive on top and your strong hive on the bottom. You don't open this front entrance. You open a side one. And you let this top hive orientate and start foraging out of the side right here, okay? And these bees on the bottom, the parent colony, are still going to use this bottom entrance, just like a normal hive. Then you come in here and you can block off this bottom entrance. But what you do is you open the bottom entrance on your Snell Grove board. So now, this bottom hive will orientate and forage out of this entrance right here. Now, for those that you can't see, this entrance is on the bottom of this double screen. So they'll forage just like a top entrance on this hive. And they'll orientate and start foraging there. So after a couple of days, you've got thousands of bees coming out of the strong hive right there. And you've got your weak hive sitting on top of it, and they're foraging out of the side here. Again, it's a rare 70-degree day, well not too rare, 70-degree day, middle of January here. The maples are blooming, the bees are foraging, they're bringing back nectar and pollen. You come out here and you close this entrance, you pull your block off the entrance of your strong hive, and then you open this one on the top side of this double screen. So now all of these bees for the past 3 days have been, or 4 days or 2 weeks or whatever, have been orientated to this entrance right here, this top entrance on the bottom box. But you've closed that. So now all those thousands of forage bees are still going to pour out of here and go forage, but when they come back, they're going to go right in this top box. So there again, in a matter of hours in a day, you can add thousands of foragers to this top hive. And then you can close this off and they'll start foraging out here. Now you will lose some foragers eventually. You know, you can do this a couple times, but when you switch it, you will lose some foragers, you know, obviously. So, not real practical if you have a whole bunch of hives, but if you have a couple, invest, I don't know, Rossman Apiaries at the state meeting in July. That's who gave me this one. So this is my commercial because they gave it to me for free and told me to mention it. They'll have it. You can buy one from them. Like I said, I feel it's a really underutilized tool by small beekeepers. You can really equalize out some colonies. So the question is won't moving this hive over here bother the weak bees? And it will, right? So that's why I said it's even better if you can change yards with it, bring it more than 2 miles. But if you can't, I feel like the benefit of the heat from this hive's doomed anyways, right? It only has 2 or 3 frames of bees. The cold weather hadn't even hit yet. We're in January. So you're giving them a fighting chance. The few foragers that this hive loses by moving them over here, in my opinion, they're getting more benefit from the heat that this hive is producing. And hopefully it turns cold for the next week and you don't lose that many foragers. No, quite honestly. But yeah, you will lose some bees, but that hive's doomed either way if you do nothing. So you might as well give it a chance, you know? So, in the spring, after I've equalized my hives by switching them and moving brood around and using my snail grove board, if I'm in my backyard, I'll use one there, that's about it. Occasionally, this year is a prime example because the bees just exploded in the spring. I still had to make some splits. And I make my spring splits different than I make my summer splits. In the spring, you're on the front end of a nectar flow. That split has the benefit of an entire nectar flow coming. So you don't need as many bees or food, quite frankly. But I'll get into that in a little bit. Hopefully I'll So, like I said earlier, in years past I've raised a few queens here and there. And I noticed many years ago that those late season queens off my last draft in the summer seemed to do better. My production hives were crashing, and these little nucleus colonies with a fresh queen cell in them, post-flow, would be gathering nectar and pulling wax, foraging on pollen when my big production hives were crashing or sitting idle. They would be starting to boom. The brood patterns, the queens were laying tons and tons of brood. Well, with that, I noticed that those bees would go into fall and into winter with larger clusters, with healthier bees. They would overwinter with larger clusters often. And then in the spring, they would come out more healthy and robust in most cases. And then, 10 years later, you start hearing all this about the post-solstice queens, So I think there is some relation to that. So after making those observations, I changed my management to try to utilize those things, utilize those queens that were gathering nectar and pollen and pulling wax later in the season than my other hives, and start making splits. Another huge thing about making splits at any time of the year is you're breaking the brood cycle in that colony. And especially for you treatment-free or softer treatment-driven beekeepers, you always hear about your oxalic acid vaporization being more effective when you break the brood cycle. Well, I hate to break it to you, but it's not only oxalic acid, but it's every possible miticide that you put in that box is more effective with less brood. If the mites reproduce, or an 80% of your mite load is under that cat brood at any given time, well, it only makes sense if you reduce the amount of cat brood in that hive, then you're going to get a better effectiveness out of whatever chemical you're using to treat your mites. So, when you make a split, whether it be in the spring, summer, or fall, depending on how you do it, it is a prime opportunity to break your brood cycle. By breaking your brood cycle, it gives you an excellent time to treat your bees with whatever treatment you so desire, and get better effectiveness out of that treatment than you would had you not split. So, another reason that I like to split my bees, and I kind of touched on this time of year, is we walk out in our bee yards and the bees are bearding from the top of your lid all the way down, and there's a beard touching the ground on a lot of them. I left a medium of honey on that box for my bees to eat through winter. And now they got 30,000 bees sitting there doing nothing but eating that honey that I left on them for winter. I might as well take them 30,000 bees, put them in another box, conserve the food that I left this hive, and then feed up my split in an out yard, more than 2 miles away. And in that split, I'm getting that new queen that has all those characteristics that I just described. Also, this time of year, it's a lot easier to find queens. It's a lot easier to find queens that weren't rushed to mate when there probably weren't enough drones for them to mate properly. And queens this time of year are on summer queen pricing. The same guy that was charging you $35 for a queen in April is probably $20 now, or $25. So they're a lot cheaper this time of year, and better mated. So those are all the reasons that I like to wait till summer to do my splits. Now the timing of them. Like I said earlier, this year I made a few spring splits. I really try not to make spring splits unless I'm selling those. I had to this year because my bees were wanting swarm. And like I said, the earlier I split, the fewer resources I put in there, because those bees have the benefit of the whole nectar flow working for them. So when I made my spring splits this year, the second week of April, I put 1 or 2 frames of capped and 1 or 2 frames of open for a total of 3 frames of brood. If I had 1 frame of capped, I might put 2 open. If I had 2 open, I might put 1 capped, but I did put a mixture. And I added a bred mated queen with them. And I moved 40 of those hives up to the mountains last week to make sourwood honey. So since the second week in April, my 3-frame splits have turned into 20-frame double deep production columns. All they cost me was $30 a piece for those spring queens. And the equipment that went with them. And not a tremendous amount of feed because they benefited from that whole flow. Now you throw some syrup, light syrup on a nuke, and you beginners know this, a nuke or a package that you get in the spring, or we all know this, they explode when they have that flow working with that feed. They grow fast. So those were the first splits I made this year. Again, on a normal year, I would have tried my best, and I tried my best this year not to do those, but I had to keep them from swarming. On a normal year, the first hives that I split, and I call them my summer splits, but they're really made in spring. It's the hives that haven't built up. Again, I put usually 20 to 25 hives per yard. And by the second week of April, the second week of March, hopefully, I'm going and putting honey supers on. And as we know, when you have pooled comb, you have the option to put more than 1 super on there at a time. So in my yards, especially when the hives are healthy and robust, I often put 2 or 3 pooled, drawn out supers with pooled comb. Now, for you beginners, you can only put 1 super foundation on at a time. We're talking pooled comb. I may put 3 or 2 on at a time in an entire bee yard of 20 hives. And I come back in a week, or 2, and in a couple weeks, the flow started. A lot of those 20 hives, maybe 18 of them, have that first super full. Well, there's 2 in that yard that hadn't even touched it yet. Okay? Those 2 were the first hives that I split. They may be full of bees. And that's good, that's fine. But you know what they're not doing? They're not doing what the other 18 are, and they're not making honey. What did I tell y'all that I keep bees for? To make some honey. So those 2 hives in my yard, although maybe full of bees, are not living up to my expectations. I go in there, I find the queen, I kill her. I take the top box off, set it on a bottom board, put a queen there and put a top on it, move it 2 miles away. Bring another top with me, put a queen in the bottom box, put a top on it, put feeders on them both, and then I've got 2 production hives for later to move to the mountains or to move to a pollination contract. So really, the first hives that I split in my summer splitting regimen are the hives that just didn't do what I expected them to do in the spring. And those bees still have half the flow or more to utilize to build up in that second box. And with that feed, it won't take them long. So then I'll idle on my splits. I split my weakest, my worst ones first. I let my good ones go. I let them boom, I let them make honey. After the honey flow, if I don't move them to the mountains, so around now, I pull my honey off, I treat them, and I split them. Anytime you stress your bees, it's a good idea to treat them, whether you do it naturally or chemically. Pulling your honey stresses your bees, so do something about it. So I pull my honey, whether they need it or not, I give them everybody a gallon of syrup, and I treat their mites. And again, I've got these colonies that are healthy and robust. I pulled 5 supers of honey off of them, and we all know what happens then. That hive that wasn't beard now yesterday is now solid black on the front. An opportune time for you to take advantage of all those extra bees and start splitting. And you know, I heard even a bee inspector say recently that bees won't pull wax in the fall. I'll be darned, they won't. I heard a lot of people say that bees won't work plastic foundation. I would invite you all to come to my apiary and see. They love it. Spend the money and get the good stuff. They'll pull it out better than wax. Mix the bucks. I've had bees pull wax foundation all the way up until October. Now you have to put some feed on them, and you may have to checkerboard that in between brood, but they'll do it with a healthy, robust colony and a young, fresh queen. And we'll take some encouragement from the beekeeper. So I don't worry about that. I'll make my splits. Last year or the year before, I think I got my last queens the 14th of October, and my splits did fine. The queens did fine. They went through winter, they pulled out wax, I fed them. But on these summer splits, I make them different. You can't throw 3 frames of brood into a summer split right now, or into a split right now and expect them to make it. So how I do my summer splits, after my honey flow is very different. I'll come out here to this same colony. I've pulled the honey off of it. And I run story and a halves, by the way. I run everything. I run winter singles, 5-frame groups, double deeps, deeps and mediums, and deeps and shallows. Got them all. My preferred setup is a deep and a medium. When I come out here and make a summer split, after June, I know that the bees don't have resources they need naturally to pull comb. So you really have 2 options. It's either to feed heavy or to put pulled comb back on them. So what you're going to do is if you have some dead outs from last year that you've put under paramoth or in a freezer, you can use that comb. You can come in here and split these hives. Now what I prefer to do is take a hive, like I said, and set an entire box off. Put a bottom board and a top on it, and add a box of pulled comb if I have it. Now I realize that everyone doesn't have a lot of pulled comb. If you don't, that's okay. If I have pulled comb, I'll put this on, like I said, put this on a bottom board, add a queen. If this queen's doing good, I'll leave her, add another box of pulled comb, feed them both, let them grow out. I will always move my splits 2 miles away. You don't have to. If you're not going to move your split more than 2 miles away, which I advise you do, put more bees in it than you think you need, because a lot of those bees are going to come back home to the parent colony. And put more open brood in it than you think you need, because those are nurse bees, and chances are they're going to stay here. If you don't have pulled comb and you want to make a split this time of year, You're a brand new beekeeper and you got this hive that's healthy and robust and boiling over with bees, but all you have is foundation. It's okay, you can still do it. Come in here to this hive, 10, 20 frame hive, whatever you have. At this point, you would preferably want to use deep frames, which I don't think I have any. I'm gonna have to pretend. So I'd come in this deep box and I'd find me 5 frames with bees and brood and hopefully a little bit of honey. And I don't like to start with less than 5 after the end of June. And I don't like to start without food for them after the end of June. My spring splits, I don't put food in. And if you buy nukes, make sure they have 5 frames of bees. There's people out there that'll sell you 4 frames of bees in a food frame or a frame to grow on. Did you come to your nuke yard to buy honey or bees, right? Make sure you buy bees when you go to a nuke yard. Don't let that joker sell you honey or foundation. But when you're making a fall split, you go in there and you take 5 frames of bees out with a little bit of food, hopefully. And by food, I mean honey and pollen. And you put those in your nuke box or your 10 frame box or whatever you have. And then you replace them with foundation. But don't go in here and put your foundation 2 on each side and 2 on one side and 3 in the other, and leave your other 5 frames in the middle. Don't do that. Those bees will neglect it. Checkerboard. What I mean by checkerboarding is you're going to have 5 frames left in this box that are built out, covered in bees, and either have brood, honey, or pollen on them. Take your foundation and put in between those. Those bees can't stand that. It'll encourage them to pull it out. Feed them real light syrup. At least 1 to 1, if not lighter. Feed them 2 parts sugar to 1 part water. If you guys buying syrup, make 3 buckets of syrup out of 1 bucket. You can do that, and we'll encourage those bees to make more comb this time of year. So sometimes, last year was a prime example. My summer splits, I had done everything I've told you. I had split my bees, I'd moved them 2 miles away, I was feeding them light syrup. There was a lot of bees there, but they weren't pulling comb and they weren't raising bees. Why? Because there's 3 parts to that equation, and there's actually 4. To make bees, you have to have bees and a queen, obviously. You have to have heat. Bees will not pull wax and make bees if it's too cold. Well, we're talking about the middle of August. If I had one thing, I had heat. You need feed. I was putting 2 parts water to 1 part sugar syrup on them, 2 gallons at a time in a feeder, so they had nectar. I've never fed my bees pollen in the summer before. I've never had to, until last year. And I sat down and scratched my head. It's like these bees have everything they need, except pollen. It's the only thing. If there wasn't pollen coming in the door, I could sit out there and watch them. But they had all the other parts of the equation. So I went out there and I raised myself some hive beetles. I took me some pollen patties, and I put me some in between my boxes there. I put my mediums back on there, and I put my syrup on there, and I fed them. And the reason I say I raised me some hive beetles, because if you do that in the summertime, and you throw a whole pollen patty on that hive, you have signed its death warrant. It's gone. The hive beetles like that pollen about 10 times more than those bees do. And they get in there and they lay their eggs in it, and then those larvae will hatch out, and those bees can't do anything about it. Especially those pollen patties with wax paper on them. Because those little maggots get up under that wax paper, and those bees can't do a thing about it. And they multiply, multiply, multiply. Next thing you know, you come back and your hive's slammed out, and you got maggots pouring out the front of it. So if you choose to feed your bees pollen in the late summer, you have 2 options, in my opinion. You take that pollen patty and you cut it to a piece the size of your hand or smaller that these bees can consume in a day or less, or maybe 2, but no more than 2. And you put it in there in small increments, and you let them consume it all before you add more. First of all, you determine if you even need pollen. On a normal year, you probably won't. But if you need it, and your bees aren't growing, then you have to provide. Be careful with those patties. The second way you can feed pollen this time of year extremely effectively and not have to worry about that is open feed dry pollen powder substitute, Mega Bee or Ultra Bee. You know, everybody's all about the Ultra Bee, but if you really get down and dirty with Randy Oliver studies that mega bee is where it's at, just in my opinion. So, we've kind of talked about the timing, we've kind of talked about how I do it. Sorry, making sure I covered everything here that I wanted to. So a couple things to think about. I know I've went through a lot, and I have one benefit. I have a ton of beekeeping equipment, right? I have deeps, I have mediums, I have shallows, I have tops and bottoms, nukes, and everything, right? Way too much. You may not be in that same situation. So what I would advise you to do is don't go out and buy all this junk. Use what you got, right? If you got that 5-frame nuke over there, use it. Don't go buy a 10-frame box. Take your 5-frame nuke, make your split, maybe buy another 5-frame nuke, overwinter it as a double 5-frame nuke. You never know. Your 10-frame hive might die in the spring. You might not need a whole new setup. You might just be able to transfer those in here. If both hives live, so be it. That's good. Buy your new equipment in the spring. Just don't go out and buy tons of junk because you may or may not need it. Use what you have to make your split with. If all you have is 10-frame equipment, by all means use it. You know, I think we get this perception in our head that a split is in a 5-frame nuke box. It's not. A split is in whatever box you put it in. So you be economical, be thrifty. Use what you have. So, and then, like I said, I'm a fan of purchasing my queens. You'll hear people and you'll be advised, you know, you don't have to buy queens. And I don't have queens for sale, I'm not trying to sell all queens. But you'll hear people say, make a walk-away split. And for you beginners, what people are talking about when they say walk-away split is they mean you come out here, you go through this box, you find a queen, you get yourself 5 frames or 10 frames or whatever you want without a queen, and you put it over here and walk away from it, and you let them raise their own queen. As beginners, in your beginner class, you hopefully took, you were taught about the different types of queens, which is emergency super seizure queen, which are typically very poor in quality and a result of the bees being in an emergency state. Queenless, they know it. They take the oldest possible larva and they replace that queen with a, sometimes, I would say oftentimes, less than stellar queen in an emergency situation. They want someone in there laying eggs tomorrow, so they try and rush the situation, and it often results in a poor quality queen. That's an emergency super seizure queen. That is what you raise when you do a walk-away split. The other types of queens that your literature teaches you about would be a super seizure queen, which is when these bees notice their queen is failing. A lot of these purchased queens that we buy, we put them in there and they do good for a couple weeks, and then we notice a queen cell right on the side of the frame, or 2. Usually in that brood chamber, there'll be a queen cell or 2 hanging on there. Those are typically usually super seizure point cells. They're usually in the middle of a frame. Those bees are realizing that there's something wrong with that queen. Sometimes she will have the most perfect laying pattern. She will look like the best queen to you that you've ever seen, but those bees know that she's not good, and they'll replace her. And those are typically pretty good queens. But the bees make that decision, not the beekeeper. And then we have swarming queens. In the spring, when your hive is healthy and robust, unless it's just got swarmy genetics, which is a thing, but most of the time it's healthy, robust colonies get the swarming instinct, and that's how they reproduce naturally. And as we know, they raise queens and do so. Also very high quality queens that you can utilize those queen cells to make splits with. I'm not going to get into that. It's a totally different talk, but they are typically pretty high quality queens, and the bees typically raise extras, so you can utilize those and make splits with them. The 4th type of queen that I feel like is the 4th type of queen that the literature really doesn't acknowledge is the grafted queens that we purchase. You know, they're not a super seizure queen, they're not an emergency super seizure queen, and they're not a swarm queen. So it's like this man-made created queen. However, I feel like it's our best chance, especially this time of year, because emergency super seizure queens, as I said, are typically pretty poor quality. We don't want those. Super seizure queens are dictated by the bees, so we can't force them to raise them. They raise them when they need it, and they only raise 1 or 2, so they don't have extras, typically. And then the swarming queens, I already said that, we're in the wrong time of year, so we're just not raising swarming queens. So we're kind of left with either emergency super seizure queens or grafted queens. And at least when you purchase a grafted queen, although the bees are put into an emergency state and raise those queens in the state of an emergency, the beekeeper has controlled the age and size larvae and hopefully the quality and amount of food that this cell building hive that produces those queen cells has received. Therefore, raising the best possible queens that you can and giving the bees the chance to raise the best possible queens they can. That said, it's really easy to raise queens. Anybody can do it. Breeding them's a completely different story. So when you're purchasing your queens, purchasing them from a reputable breeder is also a good idea, in my opinion. So, if you have made up your mind that you're not going to purchase queens, and you want to do a walkaway split, then please take my advice and do what we call a walk back to it split. So you can split this off, just like I said, you have a healthy, robust colony. You want to make 2 out of it, and as all beekeepers, you're really cheap, and you don't want to pay 35 bucks for a queen or 20 bucks for a queen or whatever. You want to set these over here and let them raise their own queen because old Billy down the road told you you could. All you had to do was put your springs open brood in there. They'd raise a queen in 30 days. She's good to go. She's laying, which is partially true. But you don't know how good she's going to be. The bees will start with an older larva than they should. So if you walk back to this split in 5 days, you can somewhat control that. Because when you come back in 5 days, if they started with the right age larva, those queen cells will not be capped. But when you come back on day 5, I promise you 2/3 of them queen cells are going to be capped. So what does that tell you? They started with an larva that was older than 24 hours to have capped queen cells in here on day 5. So on day 5, when you come back to it, you can remove all of your capped queen cells out of here, leaving the uncapped ones, which theoretically have either been started later than when you separated them, or they started them with the right age larva. So we're going to gamble and hope that they started them with the right age larva and they produce a better emergency super seizure queen than they would have had we not intervened and cut out those capped queen cells. But I still think your best bet is to purchase a queen from your reputable supplier and put it in there. I hope I didn't confuse y'all too much with that. The one benefit of doing that is although you are not breeding those bees, you're simply letting them raise some queens, you can be selective as to what genetics you're replicating in your bee yard. Don't do that to your meanest colony that eats you up and meets you at the back door every time you walk out, right? Do it to the ones that put up 5 supers of honey last year that you can work without a veil and shorts and flip-flops without, with minimal smoke. That might be desired characteristics and traits that you want to carry on. So be aware of what bees you're splitting, and where you're purchasing your queens from. There again, the queen is the longevity of that colony. So spend money and get a good one. So actually splitting your hive, like I said, and whenever people remove this top box and split it off, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the kinds of splits. It's what most people would refer to as a 50-50 split. I'm taking exactly half the resources and starting a new hive with it, okay? That's my preferred type of split. You can certainly remove a few frames, add a queen, and especially depending on the time of year. But for all you beginners that raised your hands and sat down whenever I started, have been keeping bees maybe even 5 years or less. And for all you us experienced beekeepers that have been keeping bees for 20 years, we know when we get out here in this hive this time of year, and there's 40, 50, 80,000 bees in there, it gets pretty hard to find that queen. And especially if you can't find your queen, you're sitting there thinking, well, man, this guy stood up here and talked for an hour, and everything he's talked about, I have to find my queen to be able to do this. Not true. So how do you do it? If you can't find your queen, or if you're a little lazy and don't want to, or if you just have time restraints and don't have time to, you do the Doolittle method. Come out here to this extremely strong colony. It's boiling over with bees. We're going to make them a little bit mad, but it's going to make it a little bit easier on you. And how I like to do it, personally, come out here, 2-box colony, whatever your configuration is, to do this, it has to be 2. Doesn't have to be. You need 2 boxes. Doesn't really matter what your hive is, but you need 2 boxes full of bees. You're going to split them, so obviously they're going to be full of bees. Come out here for the Doolittle method. This is when we can't find our queen, I'll set my top box off. I'll go through both of these boxes, and I'll find 10 frames that I want in my split. Now I might find some open brood. We'll split this time of year. It's going to contain some open brood for sure. This way, you have to have open brood for this to work. So we're going to put some open brood in here, in this box. We're going to transfer it. As we do, we're going to brush all the bees off this frame and the bottom box of the parent colony. We're going to set this frame of open brood in here, beeless, no bees on it. And then we're going to find us, another frame of brood, so forth and so on. We're going to brush all the bees off of every frame in this box until they're all in this box. Now what we have is our split, essentially, in this box, but no bees. It's got open brood, it's got sealed brood, it's got honey and pollen. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come out here and put a queen excluder on this hive right here that now contains our queen and all the bees we've brushed off. And we set our split up on top of it. Come back 5, 6, 24 hours later. What you have is a box full of bees and no queen, with brood in all stages of development and food they need, that you can set on a bottom board. Add a queen in the top 2, move them 2 miles away. You've got your old queen and all the resources that are left right here. Take your queen excluder off, throw a top on them, add a second story, feed them up, whatever you want to do. You just made a split without ever finding your queen. Or saving yourself a whole lot of time if you want to go in a bee yard and make 20 splits in about 15 minutes. Go in there the day before and shake all your bees down and your queen excluder's on. You can really make some splits fast. So, we've split our bees. Now we gotta feed them. Because we've either put empty comb from dead outs from last year on here, pool comb, drawn out comb, or we've checkerboarded in foundation. The flow's over. The bees aren't gonna do much with that comb unless you entice them to. And they're darn sure not even gonna look at that foundation unless you give them a reason to. So you gotta feed them. Feeding bees, like I said, this time of year, if you have to feed pollen, it brings its own difficulties with the small hive beetle. But feeding syrup this time of year is hard enough. Why? For the robin. If you have to feed your bees right now, be careful. If you're feeding your bees with entrance feeders, the Boardman feeders that slide in the front, go home tonight, take that jar off, and throw that feeder in the storage until spring. You should throw it in the trash. Don't break it out until spring at least, because it's going to cause you a lot of trouble this fall if you're feeding in the entrance. Because there's not much forage. We're in a dearth right now. And a good, healthy, robust colony is going to do anything it can to find syrup. And when it does, it's going to collect it. And when that feeder, if it finds a weak hive with an entrance feeder on it, or a feeder of any kind, it's going to rob it out. Those bees are going to fight. It'll clean out even some strong colonies if robbers get a hold of them, especially weak ones. You know what's weak right now? It's that split you just made and we're trying to feed up. So we're going to reduce the entrance. It's the first thing we're going to do when we move 2 miles away. And we're going to move it to a yard with other splits. We're not going to put it in a yard with a bunch of healthy, robust production colonies, because that's asking for trouble. And then we're going to feed them. We're going to feed them mostly syrup. How are we going to deliver that syrup to these splits with reduced entrances to keep robbing at bay? Well, we're not going to feed them with a Boardman feeder. We just talked about that. My preferred feeders, honestly, are these division board feeders. They're super cheap, depending on where you buy them. Mother Lode Industries, $2 a piece, something like that, $1.50. Or you can buy them from day down for like 8 or 7. But they replace a frame in your hive, they hold a gallon of syrup. The main thing is they don't leak. Also, the bees have to come in this entrance and all the way up, just like a hive top feeder to get to it. Now, I used to love hive top feeders, but they always seem to leak with time, and they're expensive. So I moved away from them. But I do like the hive top feeders. I don't have one to show you, but I like them because the bees have to come, robber bees have to come through your entrance, which is reduced if you're feeding, hopefully. And they have to come all the way up to the top. They have more bees to cross, so it's safer. Another type of feeder which works really good are these bucket feeders. They've got a screen, or you poke a couple small holes in the lid. You fill them up with syrup. This is a 2 gallon, this is a 1 gallon. You fill them up with syrup, put the lid on them, and I always invert them over a bucket of syrup because a little bit of syrup is going to drip out. It's just like a chicken feeder. You're creating a vacuum in there. And I do this over another bucket because you don't want to spill syrup this time of year. That's the #1 no-no in a bee yard. If you spill syrup or honey this time of year, from now until late August, you're going to start some trouble. Robbing is what I mean. So I wait till it stops dripping. It'll only take a couple seconds. And this type of bucket, there's enough room for bee space in this lid, so I just set it right on top of my frames. The downside to that is for every hive you're feeding, you have to have a separate deep box to go around that. Now we're going to pretend that that's a deep, because it won't work with a needle. And then you put your lid on. Now this top box doesn't have frames in it, and all you beginners are thinking that's a huge violation of bee space, and it is. But the bees don't want to pull comb right now because we're in a dearth. So if you're just trying to put weight on this hive, if you have used pulled comb to replace this is a good way to feed it. They'll transfer that syrup down and put it in the comb. If you're trying to get these bees to build comb, that might not be the best feeder because you do have a bunch of violation of bee space up here, and they can fill that with bird comb, as we know. How do I avoid that? Well, I make these tops out of Advanatech. It's like OSB. It's subfloor is what it is. It's not regular OSB. It's $30 a sheet. You can make 10 tops, 10 full-size tops, and I think 3 or 4 nuke tops out of $30. So less than $3 a piece. I take, I don't know the exact size of that, 3 and some 1/8 hole, and I put in there. That'll fit a mason jar lid. I used to use half-gallon mason jars, but I quit. And now, for the hive that is still pulling wax, I can put this feeder outside the hive right on top of that without having to have an extra box. I just set a brick up on top of it. And that hive that's pulling wax doesn't have that violation of bee space. So I don't have to worry about a bunch of bird comb in there when I come back. It's a really good way to feed. Again, the bees have to, if robber bees want to rob this, they have to come all the way through it. The downside, now every feeder that you possibly use in your hives has a downside to it. This one is the bees drown in it. They get in there and drown. It just happens. You will not drown a single bee with this feeder. But when that sun hits it, it forces a little bit of syrup down through there. It builds up pressure in here when it heats up. Or in the wintertime, fluctuation in temperatures will create a pressure in there and will force out a little bit of syrup. Now, if you have a healthy, robust colony in the winter or in the spring or summer, that doesn't matter. Those bees clean that up and take care of it. But if you're a bad beekeeper or lazy or too busy, and maybe a mite's got in here, and reduce the population a little bit, and that you get that pressure on there, and a little bit of that syrup makes its way to the landing board. Hello, robbers. Buffet is open. That hive is doomed. So maybe not the best option for a hive that's not healthy and robust. If y'all get jars from Pipeline Supply, you can get buckets from them too for like a bucket piece. And I make my own. I put my own screen in them too. You can buy the screen at Better Bee. They sell them for $8 a piece. You can make them yourself for like $1.50 or $2. So, I guess really my point is, when you're feeding them, just pay attention to robbing. Now, again, I'm cheap, super cheap. I'll show you, this was my preferred feeder until this year when I switched to the division boards. They're in every recycling bin in every neighborhood across the county. They're free, you can pick them up. I cut out a hole about the size of an index card on them, and stuff them full of pine needles. A full-size hive this time of year that you're trying to feed up and not get to pool comb, again, take the top off, a 10-frame box will hold 3 milk jugs laid on there like that. The downside is, again, now this time you can use a medium and it will fit over them. You can put 3 gallons of syrup on that hive at a time. And you can put your top on if you're trying to feed them up fast in the summer, or if you're not going to be back for a couple of weeks. So those are a few options, and I'm not going to tell you what's best. Like everything else in beekeeping, use what works for you in your operation. I use a little bit of all these feeders. A lot of my hives right now have division board feeders and 2-gallon feeders on top of them, because I'm pulling wax and splits. Just use whatever you've got. Use what works for you. And how late will I split my bees? I totally had some bee math I was going to share with you at the beginning. Do y'all mind if I skip back to the very beginning of my talk? Because it's really interesting. I'm going to do it. So when I really start my full-on splits, we're nearing the end of the flow. And this is what, I write all these notes and don't even read them half the time. And this is what happens, is I skip a really important part, a really important point that I was trying to make. So our flow's going, and I'm thinking about making summer splits. When do I actually start splitting my bees that are making honey? Okay? I use bee math. I know that our flow typically slows down really hard around the middle of June. Okay? Can everybody agree with me on that? Middle to end of June-ish, give or take. Not to say we won't make some honey in July, but just not as much. So I use that to my benefit. I know, as an experienced beekeeper, if our flow ends, let's just use June 15th for easy numbers. And we're not going to make a huge amount of surplus honey after June 15th, and I know that. That tells me, well, we also know that only forage bees that are like 30 days old forage for nectar, right? They have all these duties in the hive that they progress through before they actually become a forager. So, if the flow ends on the 15th, then that bee had to emerge from pupa stage on March 15th to progress through the duties of a worker bee to become a forager, okay? So me, the beekeeper, knows that, so I can go in here around, did I say March? I meant May, May 15th. I can go in here around mid-May and remove a lot of open brood from this hive, because none of that open brood will ever forage on our nectar flow. Because those bees will pupate and then emerge, and then by the time they progress through all the jobs and duties of a worker bee, the flow's over. So my first real round of splits happens around that 2nd or 3rd week of May. Because I know, and at that time I take mostly open brood and young bees, because those bees are never going to make me honey. And then I'll continue to split my hives, just random times throughout the years, or throughout the summer, whenever it's convenient for me. And I'll continue making those splits until our first frost is maybe the middle of October. I want a large population of bees in there by then. And I'm a gambler, so I'll gamble a little bit and go later than I should. Like I said, I've made them as late as mid-October. But I really want my queen laying a bunch of healthy winter bees in there. I want those bees to be at a good age by middle of November. So I want them to be eggs by the middle of October. So I really don't want to do my splits any later than October 1. That's me, who raises queens and has enough bees that I can gamble with. For the beginner, I would strongly encourage you not to make splits after the end of August. If you feel like you have some money to waste and or are a gambler, then go for it. But know that you're running, it's a risky business. The later in the year you get, you have crossed that threshold of getting awesome queens, and you are now getting to a time of year after August that you may get iffy so-so queens, if any queens at all. And it's going to get a lot harder that late in the year to get bees to pull comb and really multiply. That said, if we're in a good fall flow, things can go pretty good. So, needless to say, throughout the year, I split most of my bees. I sell some nukes, I raise some queens. I have noticed over the years, my splits this year will be my biggest honey producers next year. So why not profit off of that and use that to my advantage to make more splits this year, but since I know they're going to be my best bees next year, historically, is what I try and do. So most of my hives will end up getting split, and I usually try and grow my operation. So I'm trying to always increase my hive numbers. So if you're sitting there, you have all the hives that you want and or need, and you're like, you don't need splits, you don't want splits, I would still challenge you to make a few splits. Make a few splits and sell them. You can sell 10 hives of bees in North Carolina legally without being inspected. If you want to sell more than 10 hives of bees, you have to get inspected and get a permit. It's $25. It's super easy. The only thing that inspection is they're looking for American foul brood, more or less. But you don't have to do all that. If you only got a few hives of bees and that's all you want, and you don't want to make splits, I challenge you to make them anyways. Make 4 or 5 and sell them legally. And then take that and buy a smoker, hive tool, a couple of complete hives, go to your church, a Boy Scout group, a Girl Scout group, somewhere where there's kids. Find a kid with some interest, take that $500,000 that you sold them nukes and made, buy a couple hives, give them to that kid, take him under your wing and start a new beekeeper. Right? Take a look around in here, see one kid. So I'll challenge you to do that if you don't want to make them for yourself. That too will help us in this beekeeping industry. So at this point, if you guys don't have any, well, I'm sure somebody's got questions. But I really appreciate you letting me come, and I will field a few questions. If I don't know the answer, I'll make something up. Yes, sir.
For someone who has, like the family has, doesn't plan on having more than, say, 2 hives, where do the robbers come from? They just come from the hives?
Great question. So where do the robbers come from? The robbers are going to come from your strongest hive, perhaps, or a strong hive nearby.
How close is nearby?
Within a few miles. I mean, it's hard to say. They can forage up, we'll forage up to 3 miles. I would say it's probably within a couple.
I have no hives within that distance. If I have 2 hives, should I stop robbing by just feeding both of them to make sure?
Great question. So he's asking if he only has a couple hives in his yard, and could you stop hive by feeding both of them?
Yeah, feed them both so that there's no reason for the strong.
I don't think you would stop robbing like that, but you would help prevent it like that. So this time of year in particular, in the spring, you can get away with feeding your weak hives and not your strong ones because they have a nectar flow. Bees want to forage. They want to forage on flowers. This time of year, they don't have the nectar flow, right? So if you're going to feed one hive, feed them all, and you're going to help reduce robbing. But as far as stopping it,
Well, I'm just talking about not letting them.
Right. So yeah, right now, if you're going to feed bees, feed the entire yard. Reduce your entrances. The best thing to do for robbing is prevent it. Once you have a robbing issue at hand, you have trouble. I mean, there's no easy answer. Every beekeeper in here is going to tell you a different way to deal with it. But the fact of the matter is you have a bad robbing scenario going on, you're probably going to lose some bees. You're probably going to get ended up out there trying to fix it because bees get angry. And you're probably not going to stop it unless you get that robbing hive away from there. Really. I mean, that's...
I thought I had seen somewhere where you just close off the hive and stay alive for a day or two.
You can. So he said he saw where you can just close off the hive. The first thing you do if you see robbing is reduce your entrance. And I'm not talking about reduce it to the small part on your entrance reducer. I'm talking about 1 bee wide, 5/16 of an inch. Half of your small entrance reducer gap, right? If they're really getting nailed. And that's probably not going to be enough. You can go out there and put some sticks and some grass on the entrance to disorient the robber bees. You can use robber screens, they make them, but my whole issue with robber screens, if you got a yard of 20 hives and robber screens on each one of them, that entrance just becomes the entrance. You know what I mean? Like all those 20 hives are used to foraging out of the side of that. It no longer is a robber screen, it's just an entrance. So if you've only got a couple hives, the robbing screens work. There's no easy solution to robbing. The best thing you can do is feed, if you're gonna feed them all in your yard, and don't spill syrup or honey. Not even a drop. Not even a drop. Don't let it trickle down the side of the hive. If you do, wash it off. That's trouble. That's the best thing you can do for robbing, in my opinion, is prevent it. And if it starts, and if it's bad, what I do in my yard is I get a wet bed sheet, and I go out there and throw it over it, and then I move that hive out of there at night. Because the one that's getting robbed, or if I can find the hive that's robbing, I'll get it out of there. That's in the middle. You know, if it's in full swing robbing, that'll pretty much stop it, but you still have to do something, or else tomorrow it's going to start again. Right. So, Miss Anderson.
You answered my question. Are they going to start the next morning or do they forget?
I think they start, well, oftentimes they'll start right back up, in my experience. I mean, those bees, there's going to be bees that are looking for it the next morning. So this week I had some supers of nectar that I pulled off, and I had one just sitting in my yard. I set it out there Sunday, and those bees had cleaned up Monday. Every day when I've left my house at 6 o'clock in the morning this week, there's been a cloud of bees hovering where that super was on Monday. It's not even there anymore, you know, so I feel like robbers would be doing the same thing, you know, and the box is even there, and there's still a cloud of bees every day. Yes, sir.
How late will you graft to get the best quality?
How late will I graft to get the best, as late as I can? Until they stop raising them. So, I usually shut down in August, maybe. It's, you know, to determine if they're raising good quality queens, I look at my queen, I use plastic queen cups. And if that thing ain't full of royal jelly, a day before emergence, I trash it. And if I start getting whole batches like that, I'm done, I shut down. If they eat all the royal jelly in there before they emerge, then they would have eaten more. You're ending up with an inferior queen. So, that's the way I look at it. Any more questions? Thank you for not delving into that. One thing, thank you very much. One thing that I did forget to mention that I think is very important, again, I should read my notes more. These splits, if you make splits anytime, I'm going to say after the end of May, with a young queen, and you feed them through the summer to build them up, they're going to have mite issues sooner than your other hives will. So that's when I saw the only time that I've seen my late splits do bad is when I didn't keep my mites in check the first couple of years I did it. Where I treated my production colonies, you know, and took care of them. I don't monitor mites like I should. I didn't monitor my mites and my nukes. And come around the first of the year, what had happened is these bees, while my production hives, when the dearth hit, they stopped raising brood, and I treated them, so I got control of the mites. Well, what these hives, they've been fed for the past 4 months, so they continuously raise brood. And as we know, the mites are producing the brood, so the mite populations were skyrocketing. And then I had all sorts of parasitic mite syndrome in the middle of January, and it's real difficult to deal with any issues with bees in the middle of winter. So, with all that, what I'm getting at is you may need a supplemental mite treatment on your late splits in the fall. So keep a good eye on it. So, with that, I think I'm done. Thank you again.